I was scrolling on Facebook, and one of my Facebook friends had posted, quote unquote, I say this with no apologies and no hesitation, I never liked Drew Barrymore. Now, at first, I didn't know why that person had posted that. And I'm like, well, is this just a random thing that has no relevance to anything? Or did something happen? Did Drew Barrymore say or do something wrong? Keep in mind, I work about 24 hours a day, sometimes more than that, at my job. So I don't always have time to keep up with some of the latest stories or have time to research them right at that moment. But I see this according to AP. According to AP News, Drew Barrymore dropped as National Book Awards host after her talk show resumes during strike. And I'm telling you, the internet has been slamming her. Of course, she's had some people defending her. Because, we see that this is what happens when celebrities get caught up in a controversial moment. You have plenty of people side with them, plenty of people oppose them, and of course, plenty of people don't care one way or the other or even know about it. So, this is what Drew Barrymore said in a public statement that she had released. She said, I made a choice to walk away from the MTV Film and Television Awards because I was the host, and it had a direct conflict with what the strike was dealing with, which was studios, streamers, film, and television. It was also in the first week of the strike, and so I did what I thought was appropriate thing at the time to stand in solidarity with the writers. And to be clear, our talk show actually wrapped on April 20th, so we never had to shut down the show. However, I am also making the choice to come back for the first time in this strike for our show that may have my name on it, but this is bigger than just me. I own this choice. We are in compliance. I'm sorry, I can't talk right now. We are in compliance with not discussing or promoting film and television that is struck of any kind. We launched live in a global pandemic. Our show was built for sensitive times and has only functioned through what the real world is going through in real time. I want to be there to provide what writers do so well, which is a way to bring us together or help us make sense of the human experience. I hope for a resolve for everyone as soon as possible. We have navigated difficult times since we first came on air, and so I take a step forward to start season 4 once again with an astute humility. Now, some of the comments were interesting because there were some people here who made a good point, and I was actually just watching Jake Tapper's show on CNN, and he had on Meredith Stein. And, she basically was opposed to Drew Barrymore's decision to do this. And her and a few others who sided with her essentially said the same thing of Bill Maher, Jennifer Hudson, and some others who decided to continue their shows while this strike is going on. And by the way, on a side note, I do want to say this. This is probably another reason why the strike should end, because this is just, so much more with all the division and all the other stuff that we have going on. I've said this from the beginning. They just need to pay the writers and let everything continue. We have a lot of movies and shows that we're waiting for. I'm waiting. Of course, you guys already know what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for Scream 7, Fast 11, things like that. Just pay the writers and let's just get on with our lives. Dang. So it's like, one person said this in the comment section. He said, I support this decision. There are those who will choose to demonize her for this decision, which has happened. What she does is essentially a televised podcast. Who writes for them? I don't know how you could think that she couldn't write the monologue for herself. I've written my own monologue, the introduction of my guest, and we go into it cold after that. Off the cuff and wide open. Works every time. We're starting a new podcast with a new name in a week or so, monetized and all. Drew Barrymore is a highly intelligent human being. So tell me, what's the problem? Okay, and I think that is a good point right there, and I can agree with most of that. Now, to answer his question, what's the problem? Here's how a lot of the people who support the strike, this is what they're saying. They're saying when writers go on strike, that means that everybody in Hollywood must stand in solidarity to support their, fellow brothers and sisters. And so they feel that with Drew and Bill and Jennifer and the others continuing their shows, they look at it as Well, they're just going to do their shows without their writers, which means they don't support us. And a lot of people will agree with that perspective, but then a lot of people will disagree with it and say, hey, they just because they're continuing their shows while you guys are on strike, it doesn't mean that they're opposed to what you're doing. And as Jake Tapper said, and as a few other people said, all these people have to make a living. You know, these people have families to take care of, they have kids to feed, they have bills to pay, things like that. And so that part does kind of make sense. Here's what the other comment said. Polarizing opinions in the comments, which isn't surprising considering what's going on. I was rather surprised at the announcement of a new season starting soon, as I figured it would be delayed due to the strikes. It really already was, as typically they would have already started production on new episodes by now, and the air date would have been promoted well in advance rather than this pretty short notice. So that tells me that there are things that we don't know. That's a funny thing about the social media era. People react to things without considering that there's always missing details and context to literally any and every post out there. I don't have any more of that info than anybody else here does, but my feeling here is that there's something in a contract somewhere that led to this point. Maybe something that puts the show in jeopardy if they don't deliver new episodes by a certain date, which would end up putting a lot of people out of work permanently. So something like that would put the entire show in a lose-lose situation. And in the end, Drew and crew opted to choose the least damaging of the two bad options. As someone who has worked in television on and off for 25 years, I know from experience that there are often these lose-lose choices. So I personally am reserving judgment until such time that more is known. I've always adored Drew, and I recognize that this is probably giving me a little pro-Drew bias here that I wouldn't give to others, but at the same time, I know firsthand that people can react to news without all the info available to them, and I try to reserve judgment on any social media news until I know more than what's on the surface. But my instincts tell me that this was not a choice made lightly. I'm not going to beef with anybody who chooses to protest this decision, nor am I willing to beef with those who made the decision. And then the person right underneath that person said, yeah, she found a loophole because she's greedy. All right. Let's ignore that one for a little bit. But I think that what this person right here said, I mean, how can you argue that? If you haven't worked in a particular industry and somebody else has worked there, and then here they're telling you firsthand, like, hey, this is what happens. Here's where the lose-lose situation occurs. And in other cases, I mean, here's where a win-win could occur. I mean, it really just depends. I've never worked in the industry, so I can't tell this person that they're wrong. Now, you can still disagree with it if you want to, but I was almost on the side of, actually, you know what? I'm not even going to say that. I'm going to say I was coming close to understanding why, and I almost leaned towards people giving Drew Barrymore all this flack and saying, well, she doesn't support us. Well, that's not exactly what she said, and I didn't hear her or see her say anything like that. Now, if she just came out and said, yeah, you know what? Forget the strike. I don't care about these people. I got to do my thing, and I can understand how that would come off as a little insensitive, elitist, non-sympathetic. I get that. But I feel that some people might be overreacting to this in a bit. I think that Barrymore has talent. I liked her in the first Scream. Of course, she was only in there for 5 minutes, whatever, but she was good there. There's plenty of other work that she has out there. And honestly, I don't really follow her that much. I've seen a little bit of her show, and I'll watch it a little bit here and there, depending on who she has on or what they're talking about. But, I mean, again, I think this is just another case where a lot of people are just overreacting because they want something to complain about. That's just how I see it. And again, it's an opinion. You could support the strike, you can not support it, or, you can agree with Drew Barrymore on what she said and did, or you could disagree with it, or you can probably not care about it. I mean, that happens too. You are amazing. It's too bad there are so many haters out there. Love what you do. Keep up the amazing work. I respect your conviction. I admire your choice. Thank you for being brave. Your choice, your decision, as long as you realize the implications are going to have a longer lasting effect on you and the people who come back to work. Strength and numbers in your program has just made that number less, sadly. So, I mean, so that's really what this is about. So, some show, you know what? I got to be 100% honest with you on something. And I'm not saying that I saw this coming, but considering that the strike, as I stated, is holding back essentially every show and every movie that is either on the verge of going into production or, is in production or stuff that we expect to see in the next year or two, that they recognize the fact that there's a lot of fans who just, they want to hurry up and see their show, their movie. And as I stated earlier, you guys already know what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for Scream 7. I'm waiting for Fast and Furious 11, next season of SVU, all that stuff. The next season of School Spirits. I wish they'd bring back the end game, but that's a whole nother story that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother video. But there's a part of me that kind of sensed the idea that, you know what if some of these shows just continued and they could still support the strike? Because they just want to continue the show because they know what their fans want to see. Now, with this case, you can argue it's a little bit different because this is not a scripted primetime drama. This is not just a regular television show that you watch, like, again, an SVU, a Scream TV show, or whatever regular program you watch, Criminal Minds, FBI shows, whatever, Chicago. I mean, this is just like that person said, a televised podcast where you can essentially write your stuff and you bring on your guests and it's just a free and open discussion. I mean, how many writers do you need for that exactly? So, and again, there's a lot about it that I'm sure I don't know, so I'm not going to claim I know everything here. But again, so that's basically it. So right now, I mean, we've seen, but this happens with almost every celebrity at one point in time. If there's a celebrity out there that you're aware of that hasn't caught any controversy yet or hasn't caught any heat, it's probably coming soon. For what reason, I don't know. Different celebrities catch heat and get controversial for many different reasons. I just had a discussion earlier with somebody. We were talking about Dave Chappelle. Of course, he was controversial earlier this year because he was making the transgender jokes. And then, of course, there was the Will Smith, Chris Rock thing. And then there's this comedian joked about this, or this musician said this in their song, or this show had this. So, I mean, it just bounces. So maybe this might not be a long-lasting thing for Drew. And I'm sure a lot of the people who are upset about her now over this, they might forget about it next week, next month, whatever. A year down the line, a couple years down the line, they may not even remember this. But, I mean, who knows? Who really knows? So that's all I really have to say about that. So, but again, I respect a lot of these people for what they do, and every decision they make is theirs, and whatever consequence or whatever backlash they'll take for it, if they'll find a way to work it out, deal with it. So that's pretty much just that. So Drew Barrymore is now catching heat. So that's pretty much it.